My name is Andy Fletcher. I am a locomotive designer, and today we will be learning to draw the way I do. If that's something that interests you, you'll find the world of drawing locomotives is very educational and very fun. As you draw locomotives, you learn about history, you learn about geography, you work on your math skills, you work on art skills such as composition, and as I go to shows across America, you may learn how to work on your drawing. You may meet me. You may, in person, get to learn how to draw, and you may learn a lot about the railroad industry in general. So let's go and draw. Hi, my name is Andy Fletcher, and a lot of people ask what basic materials and tools I use when I draw. And hot press illustration board is one of the main materials I use to draw on, and it is the main material to draw on. And basically why I draw on hot press illustration board is that when the finished engine is done, it allows pens such as these to apply the ink, because a lot of times it shows, a lot of people come up and say, well, I can draw the pencil lines, but I don't, if I draw on regular paper, I can use colored pencil, but I'm not able to, the ink doesn't take on regular paper. So that's why I draw on hot press illustration board. But probably one of my most important tools, if not these two are some of my most important tools, are the pencil, because the pencil does the whole drawing, it does the lettering, and it basically does the framework of the whole engine, and the calculator. Part of the problem is at the speed I do videos, it doesn't really give the calculator justice for how much work the calculator really does. Because a lot of the drawings I do are drawings I've done time after time, year after year, and the measurements are in my head. But the problem is that the calculator, like on a drawing like this where it says Florida East Coast, I really need the calculator to figure out where the word Florida fits, where the spaces go, where east and coast fit. I need the calculator to do the math of where the grills go, where the radiator section starts and stops, where the cab fits. And because of the calculator, doing the drawing teaches a lot of basic math skills, and it keeps them fresh in your head. And from that, basically, also there's a lot of pens that I use. There are kind of three different types of pens. Two are very similar, and then one's similar but different. Is that in the beginning I used to use water-based pens, and there's Mars Graphic pens and Tombow pens, which are both very similar. I recommend these for younger artists. Not that there's any real quality difference one way or the other, but these pens that I am using now, Prismacolor pens, are alcohol-based pens, and they're fine for younger artists, but the water-based pens, alcohol-based pens have a little bit of a scent, and alcohol-based pens, a little bit of alcohol gets in your eyes, it burns. So if you're just starting out, I would probably use, the water-based pens. But believe me, the alcohol-based pens, alcohol dries very smoothly, and there are a lot of colors in the alcohol-based pens, which in drawing trains, a lot of people will ask, ooh, there's Florida East Coast red versus Southern Pacific red, and these alcohol-based pens, it's very, a lot easier to match a lot of the colors. So, there's pluses and minuses to them all. And at times I use ballpoint pens, and at times I use these pens like these micron pens that do a fine line, and that helps do the separation stripes between like where the red stops, and there's a little white separator stripe in the orange. And also I just sort of a lot of times keep a little scrap of color next to my drawing, where if I take like one of my pens, like right when I'm getting started, I will just take it and say, is that the right color? It's a lot like in house paint or something. If you're picking the color to paint the outside of a house, is this the right color? So that if you're committed to a drawing, you don't, end up painting it a color you don't like. And those are some of my basic tools. And this is my Pocket Pal template, which, as I was talking about the pencil, this is basically the pencil's tool that it really works with. And these two are some of the basic secrets of hand drawing. As far as this has a little 4-inch ruler on it. And through the years, I've basically used this template for 25, 30 years now, almost. And there are other templates there's nothing wrong with any template, but this template being about 4.5 inches long, it moves around nicely in your hand, and it has, little circles, which are good for wheels and that kind of stuff. And it's easy to see the drawing through it, which is very nice, because a lot of times when you're doing lettering, you want to know where it fits on a door, and you have a lot of measurements going on in your mind as you're writing words, or if you're measuring a door, you want to know how it fits compared to a grill. So this is just a very good template. And that being said, those are just some of my basic tools for drawing trains. Hi, my name is Andy Fletcher, and today I'm going to be drawing a CSX ES44AH. As you've perhaps rail fanned across the CSX system, this is a very common locomotive that you've seen operating across the CSX system. As I put down the rail line, these locomotives you've perhaps seen in intermodal service, perhaps pulling trains bound out of the Northwest Ohio intermodal facility, or perhaps you've seen these locomotives pulling coal trains in places like Huntington, West Virginia, or you've seen them pulling general merchandise trains in Baltimore, Maryland, or across the CSX system, the new Winter Haven, Florida intermodal facility. So, as we start to draw, as you often see in these videos, first I put down the frame. And the frame, as I often say, is just a point of reference, which it's great to have a point of reference in your drawing. The frame and both the rail are a nice straight line. That is a nice straight point of reference. These keep the drawing straight. And in general, as the drawing progresses, it's definitely important that you have nice reference points. The first thing I'm doing here, as I often say in the video, is I'm composing the drawing. I'm measuring it out at different points along the frame. This is where the radiator section goes. This is where the engine room doors go. This is where the cab goes. And the thing about it is that it's very important that you compose the drawing first, because a lot of artists will come up to me and they will say, and I just sort of want to make sure that all of my composition is the exact size I want it to be. Artists will say to me, but I spend 20 minutes working on the cab, and then I found out my engine's too short, or I found out the engine's too long. And the thing is that if you compose it, if you find out your engine's the exact right length you want, and that each section of the engine is the right size, then in the end you'll be much happier that if you spend a lot of time in each area, that in spending the first 5 to 10 minutes blocking out the train, that you don't end up spending a lot of time and effort on the drawing that you're not happy with. So starting with the basic measurements where I've composed the drawing, then you'll start to watch as the train takes shape. And this begins to look like the GE ES44AHs that you've seen across the CSX system. From just a couple lines, you'll start to recognize, that's the locomotive that I've seen pulling double stack trains, pulling coal trains, pulling the oil trains, pulling general merchandise. And what it is that, see, there's a cab starting to emerge. And what it is that as these areas start to emerge, a lot of people say, well, I can't draw a straight line. And you really should try not to listen to that too much or say it yourself too much, because believe me, I could not draw a straight line myself. And as a child, and the more you practice, the straighter your lines become. There's a tendency when you feel like you can't draw a straight line to just quit. But the more you practice, the more you will just draw straighter and straighter lines. Your eye starts to see lines getting straight, and you see that as it's blocked out, this is starting to look like the locomotive. And in just about, I don't recommend drawing this fast because there's a lot of measurement. I know a lot of these measurements in my head, but do you kind of see that in this block out, there's the shape of a locomotive? And it's so important that you get the shape of a locomotive first, because in getting that shape of the locomotive, now if you start to work on the cab, and now if you start to put the engine room doors in, the whole shape of the locomotive is there. So your engine won't end up being too short or too long. You'll be very satisfied with your final results, even if it's a little off in places. If if your doors here or there are a little bit off, the main thing that people will notice is, wow, your shape is very accurate because you took that time to measure. Now I'm putting engine room doors in, and in other videos as I've talked about this, like these engine room doors are 1.5 inches. And there's 6 doors here. So take a little bit of time to say, well, 6 doors in 1.5 inches. Each door, 6, goes into 1.5 inches. That would make each door be 1/4 inch. And if, and that's why I have a calculator here, I would divide 6 into 1.5 inches, and you would come out that each door should be 1/4 inch. And as you can see, each door ends up being the exact same size.